Hello, everybody. I hope you are having a great day in the conference, and please join me on a panel that will provide an update of the readiness to deploy Open RAN at scale and how the state-of-the-art of testing can enable this. My name is Kristian Toivo. I'm the Executive Director of Telecom Infra project. Open RAN has been deployed at scale by many greenfield operators. However, the uptake in networks of established operators has been slower, although many initiatives are underway. Meanwhile, Open RAN solutions have also been deployed successfully in private networks as part of indoor solutions, where the technology offers opportunities of increased flexibility and capacity. There's been major investments in testing infrastructure and testing labs, very much also through government funding, especially in the US, and also independent labs in the industry and academia, many of them acting as OTICs on behalf of O-RAN Alliance, and they have established a platform for conformance testing that ensures that products comply with the specification issued by the O-RAN Alliance. With all the new testing infrastructure in place, there are also good opportunities for products to be verified as part of solutions for both end-to-end functionality and system performance. The O-RAN Alliance, as well as the Telecom Infra project that I am leading, are continuing to provide test specifications and guidance to the industry that can help scale the deployment of Open RAN. Today, we have with us a panel of distinguished senior industry experts, all with a long career of developing standards and technologies for and testing and trialing wireless solutions, including Open RAN. Let's hear their thoughts on the status and readiness of Open RAN, how it can scale, and how testing will evolve together with the technology as the standards and solutions continue to evolve towards an AI-native future. I'm really pleased to start this session, and I will let the panelists introduce themselves when they comment on the first question. And I will just start from the right hand on my screen, going to Simon Fletcher. So could you give your viewpoints on, given your background, your engagements, how do you see the readiness of Open RAN to scale in different types of network scenarios that are relevant to your work? And please give the audience an introduction of what you're working with and your background, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Kristian. Simon Fletcher, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the Small Cell Forum. We are a forum that looks principally at small cell products, but also small cell networks. I've spent over 20 years in the telecoms industry in a R&D and innovation role in large corporates, in particular working in joint venture activities between large corporates working on principally 3GPP networks. So the area that we're particularly interested in, the forum is an industry forum. It's interested in blueprints for deployment. We do have standards activity, or we have at least one standard that we maintain in partnership with the O-RAN Alliance, called Split 6 in O-RAN Alliance speak, and called FAPI in Small Cell Forum speak. And that's an important interface for us because it's helping to define the PHY-MAC area of interfaces between the RU-DU in the RU-DU area. I mean, for me, whenever I'm looking at test and measurement equipment, test verification activities, we're interested in total cost of ownership in small cell networks and small cell products. So anything that is helping to accelerate and reduce the cost of the deployment, getting confidence up around interfaces, reducing the effort required to interface different vendors' solutions together is very much welcome, which is why we have a strategic partnership with the O-RAN Alliance. We recognize that as an important body in terms of setting out some of the key interfaces. But of course, 3GPP also provides a great ecosystem behind it in terms of some of the key interfaces as well. And I think generally we're in a good shape. I mean, I think that there's a lot of activity happening around O-RAN that is going in the right direction on the interfaces. I would say one proviso on that would be, in general, it's not essential for all small cell networks to be fully compliant with Open RAN as such, because you can get, single box solutions where you don't really need to open up all the interfaces. However, even in those single box solutions, you can find vendors who are now using their Open RAN software that they've developed for the larger scale products, bringing those into the smaller all-in-one products, and that's reducing their development time. So it's not just about the cost of deploying and integrating various components in a live network, but also the development time reduction as well, which we're seeing as a benefit that's coming.
That's an interesting perspective, and it shows that the industry is moving forward in the different application domains, if you like. If I hand over to Adam Smith.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Adam. I'm from LitePoint, and we are a maker of test and measurement equipment, and pretty much addressing almost every wireless technology out there. Yeah, personally, I have almost 30 years now working in the wireless industry, and I love to nerd out on the physical layer. I'm a radio guy. So for today's conversation, my perspective, my point of view is really around the Open RAN radio unit. So this is an area where we've been helping to, invigorate the ecosystem and validate the performance and features. And our goal is really to help this multi-vendor ecosystem come to market. So both from the design validation phase and then ultimately to high volume manufacturing as we deploy at scale.
Fantastic. You are definitely contributing to the broad spectrum of work and use cases here. So great to have you on board, Adam. Nirlay, can you take next?
Hi, hello everyone. Thanks for inviting me, and hope all of you are doing well. So, Nila Kundu. Today I'm representing IMDEA network. So I head the standardization of this institute. It's a non-profit institute. We are about 60 strong people who interact with UC3M in Madrid. Another of my responsibility is I lead one of the subgroups of the ORAN Alliance. And previous to that, I was part of the Verizon network planning team. And as far as the Open RAN deployment is concerned, so it is going slow and steady. How I feel personally, the success of Open RAN will be defined when you can combine the RU and the DU, specifically the RUs and DU from different vendors. But as a system integrator or as a telco, they should have the ability to choose the different vendors RU and DU, and not one specific vendor. And they are combining, they're like, just for an example, Ericsson combining somebody else's RU with their DU. So that doesn't, that's not interoperability, or that's not Open RAN to me, because you are still under the control of one specific tier one vendor, right? So if as a system integrator, or rather a service provider, you can choose yourself, you can choose, mix and match different vendors. That's how or when Open RAN will be successful, and in my opinion, it's getting there, but not there yet. And so in the macro network, it is the case, but in a private network or in a brownfield environment, it is a bit challenging. But when you do in a greenfield deployment, is more or a private network scenario, I think it's a better way to deploy Open RAN interfaces. And the challenges, as it's very obvious that there would be security challenges, there would be how visible you want to make the interfaces, things like that. So there are pluses and minuses. And for a tier one operator, the SLA and the performance metrics are very, very stringent. So to me, it's not clear yet the total the TCO, if it's better if you have smaller vendors, because if you integrate smaller vendors, then the interoperability costs comes in, right? and the testing cost comes in. So it's still debatable at this moment that whether the TCO is better with a proprietary implementation, or or if you do multi-vendor deployment. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nirlay. That was a good reflection, and we'll come back to the testing aspects of this, obviously, as being in the test measurement forum. So last but not least, Venki, could you give your background, please, and also your reflection on the state of the art, if I put it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this forum. My name is Weni Ramaswami, and I am the Chief Technologist for NextG at the MITRE Corporation. I know that many of you may not have heard about MITRE Corporation. So MITRE Corporation is a not-for-profit entity working in the public interest. We are an unbiased advisor to the US government on all matters related to technology. So including AI, 5G, Open RAN, cybersecurity, and so on. We are also Oran Alliance OT Lab. So that tells us, how we are involved in the Open RAN testing and so on. So Open RAN is a very high priority item for the US government, which means that it is also a very high priority item for MITRE Corporation. Now, coming to whether we are there yet, my gut response to this, my initial response to this is that not yet. But we have made tremendous progress over the last few years. Especially with the enormous support that NTIA and other organizations have provided, right? And that has led to a significant progress in what we are able to do. And this is not keep in mind that this is not an easy task. We are introducing 10 additional interfaces, 5 different components, and putting these things together, anybody can assume that it is not going to be easy. That is something that we already knew from the beginning. But this is an enormously complex task, putting these things together. So we made a lot of progress. We are not there yet. And in the context of private networks that I'm very much aware of, the main concern is the integration cost, because the performance and optimization is really the key there. And integration cost, and many vendors, they don't trust the performance yet, trust this yet. So what we are seeing is that we are pivoting towards solutions where they are sort of Open RAN compliant, but it's still coming from the same vendor. So one vendor providing RU, CU, and DU, and RIC, and everything, which conforms to Open RAN specifications and things like that, but it beats the original vision of having a diverse set of components all coming together in a seamless fashion. So we are making progress, but we still have a long way to go, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Venki. That was a good complement to all the other reflections. And I will continue with you, because now we'll dive deeper a bit to testing. And I would like to hear different views on your experiences from the angle where you've been working. How does actual testing of Open RAN solutions compare to your experience or your organization's experience in testing the traditional RAN solutions in terms of effort, cost, complexity, available tool to support? Could you, Venki, start from your end, from your experience at MITRE?
I'll give a quick. So first of all, as I said, it has proven to be quite complicated. So as I mentioned to you before, we are an OTIC, and we are involved in pretty much testing all the parts of it, right? So RU, CU, and DU, and RIC, and so on. And I can tell you that we have been involved in RU testing. The problem is that there is no one fixed configuration, right? So let's say that you are getting an RU from somebody, from vendor A, and they have a given configuration for testing. And that configuration is going to be quite different from a different vendor's configuration, which makes it extremely complicated for the tester, because the tester has now on his or her skill set, they need to add how to test this particular configuration. And this configuration is not going to provide the same set of behavior across different different RU vendors, right? So they have very different outputs or outcomes. Let's say we are now looking at CU, which is also a component which will do the scheduling, right? And let's say that you have one of the vendors providing the proportional fare scheduling, for example. That proportional fare scheduling has 1,000 different parameters in it. And even when you are able to match one-on-one with those parameters, it's impossible to get the same behavior across these different components. So that makes it very, very complicated, very, very time-consuming, very, very inconsistent and not reproducible. So something that we do today in one of the OTIC labs may have very different outcome that you see in a different. So it's an inconsistency across these OTIC labs, and inconsistency in testing makes it super hard, super expensive, and that is one of the reasons we see as the barrier for the uptake of Open RAN, in my opinion.
Thank you, Venki. That was really insightful. And maybe I make a jump to Adam from LitePoint. I mean, I know you're working very much on ORU testing. What's your reflection to what Venki was saying?
I'll build on some of the points that were already made. I mean, the funny thing about ORAN is that in some ways it's wildly complicated the interface to the radio, but in other ways as well, it's actually helped us from a software test automation framework. So even though there's a bazillion configurations out there, the M-plane has dramatically simplified the way that we can do kind of standardized testing for software framework. So we have a platform that is 90% common, and then we just drop in the unique configuration on the M-plane. So a simple XML file now is just an easy drop-in from vendor A, vendor B, vendor C. Now, all that being said, I mean, the features in the radio need to be supported, and we're at different levels of maturity in different vendors at this point. But if I compare this to kind of a traditional RAN, where if I, for example, looked at an integrated small cell, I compare it to almost like learning a foreign language. I mean, depending on what chipset or modem is inside that small cell, you're having to learn its language. So on one hand, the interface is simple. It's an Ethernet connection, it's power, but then you've got a highly complicated, or at least highly specialized custom software interface there. Whereas on Open RAN, we explode the front haul interface. There's a bazillion configurations, but it's actually helped us deploy pretty quickly, get people's radios up and running by leveraging the M-plane.
Right. So if I understand you right, Adam, the fact that there is this openness and disaggregation, if you like, and the standard specifications that kind of in a bizarre way enables you to create test automation and test frameworks that in principle can facilitate and make things faster.
Yeah, once you get through the complication of getting the S-plane synchronization all done and getting your reception windows all dialed in, then it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, certainly there's pros and cons, but it's definitely helped to, I would say, scale is very promising.
Yeah, good to know. And maybe that's a good jump back to Nirlay, who, as he told, is also very active in ORAN Alliance. How do you see from, say, the specification work that the organization is involved in? How are you able to kind of address some of those complexities, efforts that Venki referred to, and how can that help the industry to move forward when we scale and mature?
Yeah. So first of all, Venki did a good job in not mentioning any vendors, ABC. I'll try to do the same. But if from my mouth, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Orange comes out, it's not specifically to those vendors like Ericsson, Nokia, Samsung, Mavenir, etc. But I'll try to be very generic. But so generally, legacy deployments with tier 1 vendors. So the traditional RAN will achieve seamless integration of massive MIMO radios with proprietary optimization, which the tier 1 telcos want, which deliver consistent throughput and coverage. Now, Open RAN, on the other hand, like it's ORAN compliant, massive MIMO radios will require extensive conformance testing with traditional vendors. Emulators to validate the beamforming capabilities, and performance may match the traditional RAN in a control lab environment. But when you take it to the field with all the imperfections that happen, in a large environment. Let's say, I would throw in a number like 10 to 15% lower uplink throughput was seen, due to the immature RIC algorithms, right? And latency also, like, Open RAN's VDU and VCU combination, that will also introduce additional 2 to 3 millisecond latency versus traditional integrated basebands, which impacts the URLLC use cases in industrial IoT, right? So, and multi-vendor complexity, when you have, multi-vendor, as I kind of alluded to, in a macro deployment, which combining different radios, and it needs a lot of testing, like 6+ months of interoperability testing, and that also adds to the cost, right? So the interoperability testing, layer 1 is the most complex thing in the RAN architecture, right? And when you do the synchronization for the frontal, for example, and specifically for the 7.2 split, right? So that creates issues and, interoperability challenges, all that. And so from that perspective, again, in a tier 1 environment, like single vendor stack would avoid such delays, and it's kind of one throat to choke. Whoever your tier 1 vendor is, and the service provider gets a pre-validated stack, right? And the software bundles together, right? So and also with the Open RAN is kind of struggling with the 4G, 5G dual connectivity in brownfield environments, right? And most of the environments in tier 1 is brownfield, and then need to have custom patches for the X2 interfaces, etc., for compatibility, right? So that leads to the cost and operational efficiency, right? So when you have commoditized hardware, the upfront cost may be reduced by X amount, but then when you add the integration, when you add the OpEx, right? So that leads to higher integration and higher TCO, right? And then the energy consumption, right? So the Open RAN's general purpose servers versus traditional RAN's ASICs, so consumed more power per site, because the ASICs that are purpose built, they are power optimized, to so in that sense also, so the cost savings are there, right? So these are kind of some pluses and minuses of open interfaces versus the traditional.
Thank you, Nirlay. Adam mentioned small cells, and I was thinking of Simon. Looking from your experience and the domain you're working with, from a pure testing point of view, what's your reflections of RAN versus traditional?
I was going to say, I was going to pick up on Adam's point there, because I think you were mentioning, Adam, the complexity but within the internal interfaces. But I guess to some extent in the forum, we addressed that and identified that, with the FAPI interface, which is actually interfacing, as I said earlier, in the sort of the PHY MAC area, and there are chipsets that are compatible with this interface, and it's aligned with 3GPP, and we've got a routine now of a release once every 6 months or so. So it's steadily trickling out on that sort of basis, and there are some chipset guys who are compliant, and that helps with the building of the internal interfaces of the small cell. But also some vendors have chosen to use that for a split six configuration for deployment models as well, for their deployed systems. For me, in the small cell ecosystem, the more some of the interfaces are open and standardized, we have a number of the test and measurement guys who provide emulation of interfaces. And I think a lot of this perhaps that we're discussing, and of course we all know that just plugging different vendors together and standing back and turning on the on switch and hoping it's going to work is not the way that it works in the product development teams. They will be working closely, or should be, hopefully, working closely with the usual test and measurement guys, the Viavis and Roden Swartz and whoever else who are out there and producing standardized profiles. And certainly, you know, thinking back to the early days of FAPI, we did a number of plug fests, working closely with the test and measurement guys. So we got some profiles fixed that would give us some assurance in terms of what was required. You know, and it's a gradual process. So I get, you know, to some extent, I'm hearing some frustrations that perhaps we're not making so much progress. But I was always of the thought that this was not going to be a short-term game. You know, you really got to stick at this. And you know, I think the industry is accepting that these interfaces splits make sense. And it's just going to take time to build out the capability into the test and measurement ecosystem. They need to monetize their models and their test platforms, and it will become self-sustaining over time. But I still think, yeah, generally the comments I agree with are right, that, you know, R&D activities and product developers are perhaps spending a little bit more time on the complexity of this than is ideal for the industry, but hopefully we can work through that over the next couple of years.
That was well summarized, Simon, and I think it kind of pulled together what the colleagues commented in the previous viewpoints. And I actually wanted to catch and build on that. So if I go back to Venki, you kind of explained a bit about some of the challenges still experienced in the testing, and representing an OTIC particularly, you have kind of a clear guideline and clear framework on what you are testing against. So my next question that I would take through the panel here is that, given what we have today in terms of test specifications, test tools, approaches that are done for conformance testing, integration, validation, what is it that we could do more? What would be the next logical step from a testing process point of view that could help to kind of maybe bridge that gap that Nirlay talked about, and you also referred to, Venki, in terms of effort? Venki, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the first and foremost, we need a accreditation of the testing itself, accreditation of testing labs itself, right? So that we have a consistent way by which we can test across different labs, for example. Because right now there is nothing like that. So you cannot reproduce the results that you get from one of them to the other. The second thing would be that if we can create pre-tested versions of this whole ecosystem for specific industries. So the reason why I'm saying is that, you know, the private networks, they often have very specific requirements, right? So are there ways by which we could have testing very specific to a given industry? And that can come only by working with specific verticals. So you need to understand the requirements of that vertical and come up with a set of testing requirements for those verticals. And keep in mind that once you have that, you will still need to do additional testing very specific to a given use case. But having a pre-integrated solution where you have some confidence and some trust for a given equipment ecosystem for a given vertical, I think that is going to help as well. But the first and foremost, in my opinion, is to have the accreditation of the testing lab itself.
Thank you. No, that was clear. So maybe because we are running a bit short on time and we have a couple of questions from the audience as well, I wanted to, Nirlay, as you're active in Oran Alliance, any reflections on what Venki said, and how could you facilitate, or how could we as an ecosystem facilitate that?
Yes. Wearing my Oran Alliance hat, so it's a product of the Oran Alliance, the OTICs, and Venki just nailed the point. So you have a number of OTICs all over the globe, right? And all the OTICs are not capable or not capable enough, or they don't have the resources to test all the different layers, right? And if you test certain interfaces or certain layers, right, it has to be very, very consistent. And we are seeing that consistency is not there. And from Oran Alliance perspective, I feel there should be a gatekeeper from the Oran Alliance to test the results that's produced by the different OTICs and hence, and then only pass it to the customer, right? And also, if you see from the pyramid perspective, like the service providers are at the top of the pyramid, right? They haven't yet mandated or soft mandated any certification from the vendors through the OTIC lab, okay, through the Oran Alliance labs, right? So why? Because the service provider is still not confident of the repeatability of the results of the right. And then when that happens, it will automatically flow through. So what the tier 1 service providers do is, like, they, even if it's tested by the OTICs, they will do most of the testing in their own labs themselves. So that step should not be there. And eventually, when we have confidence, the tier 1 service provider, the service providers have a confidence with the results coming out of the OTICs, then only it will be in the RFPs, and then then the OTICs will be successful, and the concept of Oran deployment will be successful. So today the conformance, the normative specs are still being developed, right? And the front haul is the most solid one, right? And then when you have that kind of stability, then only you can compare apples to apples. Other than that, if you test any other component by the specifications are still being written, right? So that's probably the way to go. So yeah.
So it seems there is still some work to be done, clearly, and I think we could spend certainly a full hour. I think we have been discussing and touching upon really important topics, and maybe not having had really the time to deep dive to it. And we only have a couple of minutes left. I wanted to ask one more question that came from the audience, and a little bit in a modified way. I mean, basically, we talk about the real life. We have and will have mixed Open RAN, traditional RAN solutions that will live side by side. Adam, from your point of view, when you think about the testing capabilities and that the industry offers, are you tackling that or thinking of that specifically as a provider of test solutions, test tools, or is that something that needs extra attention?
So it's a difficult question to answer in just a few seconds here, but maybe to build on Venki's thoughts a little bit. I mean, we're all from a test and measurement point of view, we're geared towards testing towards the specification. And as we move forward in the industry, I think what we need to move towards is testing towards a collection of experience, right? I mean, we're finding things that fail in the real world, that don't interoperate in the real world, and being able to feed that back into the test, I think, is important moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, we could have a whole panel on that topic.
Exactly.
And with that said, as we are coming to the end of time, I would have had more interesting discussion or questions to ask, but I would like to thank the panelists so much. Very insightful. I hope the audience got the chance to enjoy and reflect also on your responses, and hopefully this will trigger more questions and new opportunities to come back in future panels to tackle these really important questions on how do we scale Open RAN. Thank you, distinguished panelists. Thank you, audience. Have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.